I am Madison, 28 years old, and 1 year ago I made the most impulsive decision of my life, buying my grandfather Harold's struggling bee farm. My parents thought I was throwing away my marketing career for a dying business. They laughed in my face at the dinner table, but sometimes the decisions others mock end up being the ones that completely transform your life path. Before I tell you how I turned my grandfather's failing bee farm into a thriving business that my parents eventually begged to join, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories about unexpected success. Growing up, my grandfather's bee farm was my favorite place in the world. While other kids spent their summers at camp or the community pool, I begged my parents to let me stay with Grandpa Harold. My parents, Rebecca and David, were always climbing their respective corporate ladders, Mom in pharmaceutical sales and Dad in financial consulting. They valued stability, sensible career paths, and retirement plans. When I announced my marketing major in college, they were thrilled I was following a practical route. "Marketing will always be in demand, honey," Mom would say. Smart choice, but my weekends and summers belonged to Grandpa Harold and his bees. The farm was only 40 minutes outside of Chicago, but it felt like a different world. 5 acres of wildflowers, clover fields, and 60 beehives at its peak. I can still close my eyes and hear the gentle humming of thousands of bees going about their work, smell the sweet honey mixed with beeswax, and feel the warm sunshine as Grandpa and I would inspect the frames. "The trick to beekeeping isn't controlling the bees, Maddie," he would say, his voice gentle but firm. "It's understanding them. They've been doing this millions of years longer than we have." By age 12, I could spot a queen, identify a healthy brood pattern, and knew exactly when honey was ready for harvesting. My parents tolerated what they called my countryside phase, assuming I'd outgrow it. After college, I landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The pay was excellent, the benefits competitive, and my parents were ecstatic. I had a sleek apartment in Lincoln Park, went to networking events, and checked all the boxes of success. On paper, everything was perfect, but 3 years in staring at PowerPoint presentations for products I didn't care about, something felt hollow. The only time I felt truly alive was during my monthly visits to Grandpa Harold's farm. Those visits became increasingly concerning. Grandpa was 74, now his hands shaking slightly with early Parkinson's. The once thriving farm was down to 20 hives. Equipment was breaking down. The honey house needed repairs. The honeybees faced new parasites and diseases that required constant monitoring. "I'm just getting too old for this, Maddie," he confessed one Sunday afternoon, as we sat on his porch swing, thinking about selling to the Wilcox Development Group. "They want to build vacation homes." I nearly spilled my tea. Vacation homes. "But this land has been in the family for 3 generations. Grandpa's eyes misted over. "Don't think I want to, but your parents think it's for the best. Get some money for my retirement. The bee business isn't what it used to be." I looked out over the wildflower field, imagining it bulldozed for cookie-cutter vacation properties. Something twisted in my chest. This land wasn't just property, it was living history, my history. "What about finding someone to take it over, keep it running?" I suggested. Grandpa smiled sadly. "Who'd want a failing bee farm these days? Your cousin Michael isn't interested. Your brother Ryan's allergic. Your sister Jennifer lives in California." He didn't even mention me. Like everyone else, he assumed I was happy with my corporate track. But as I drove back to my apartment that night, I couldn't shake the image of developers tearing up the wildflower meadow, the feeling that something precious was about to be lost forever. 2 weeks later, during a particularly soul-crushing marketing meeting about laundry detergent branding, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Grandpa during my lunch break. "Don't sign any papers with the developers," I said. "I want to buy the farm." The silence on the phone lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Grandpa, are you there?" Madison, his voice cracked slightly. "You have a good career. Your parents would never." "I'm 28, Grandpa. I don't need their permission. I've been saving for a down payment on a condo, but I'd rather invest in the farm. I can use that for a down payment and get a small business loan for the rest. 3 days later, I drove to the farm with a business loan application and property transfer paperwork. Grandpa was waiting on the porch looking both relieved and worried. Are you absolutely sure, Maddie? This place needs a lot of work. The honey production is down by 60% from 5 years ago. I've never been more sure of anything, I said, meaning it completely. We agreed on a fair price, much less than the developers offered, but enough to supplement Grandpa's retirement. He would stay in the farmhouse while I would move into the smaller guest cottage. He would teach me everything he knew about commercial beekeeping while I revitalized the business. The real challenge came that Sunday. At the weekly family dinner at my parents' suburban home, I waited until dessert to make my announcement. I have some news, I said, setting down my fork. I'm buying Grandpa's bee farm. The silence was deafening for about 3 seconds. Then my father burst out laughing so hard he nearly choked on his cheesecake. My mother stared at me as if I'd announced I was joining the circus. Very funny, Madison, Mom, said her smile tight. Now what's your real news? That is my real news. I've already filed the business loan application. Dad's laughter died. You're serious? You're going to throw away a $60,000 salary to play farmer? I'm not playing anything. I'm going to revitalize the business. My sister Jennifer snorted. With what experience? Your marketing degree? Actually, yes. The farm needs better branding and market positioning. Plus, I've been helping Grandpa since I was a kid. Weekends and summers as a child don't qualify you to run an agricultural business, Mom said, her voice taking on the condescending tone she used when she thought someone was being particularly dense. Dad leaned forward, switching to his financial advisor mode. Madison, honey, let me lay out some numbers for you. The bee industry is struggling nationwide. Colony collapse disorder, foreign competition, rising supply costs. Your grandfather's farm has been losing money for years. I'm aware of the challenges. You're making a massive mistake, Mom interrupted. You have a degree from Northwestern, a career with advancement potential, benefits, stability, and you want to throw it all away on a whim. It's not a whim. It's financial suicide is what it is, Dad interjected. You'll burn through your savings in 6 months, the bank will foreclose, and you'll be back asking for your old job if they'll even take you. My brother Ryan, always the peacemaker, tried to soften the blow. Maybe just keep it as a weekend hobby. Don't quit your job right away. That wouldn't work. The farm needs full-time attention. Madison has always been stubborn, Jennifer said to no one in particular. Remember when she insisted on trying out for varsity soccer even though she'd never played before? This is different, I insisted, feeling like I was drowning in their disapproval. Is it? Mom raised an eyebrow. Or is this another example of you jumping into something without thinking it through? Like that semester abroad you came home from early, or the 3 different majors you tried before marketing? Each example stung like a slap. They were bringing up ancient history failures from my late teens and early 20s to discredit a decision I was making as a grown woman. Only Aunt Eleanor, Dad's sister, who had been quietly listening, spoke up in my defense. I think it's brave. Not many people have the courage to follow their passion these days. Dad rolled his eyes. Eleanor, don't encourage this nonsense. It's not nonsense, I said, my voice rising. The farm is family heritage. It means something, and I believe I can make it profitable again. With what business plan? Dad demanded. What market research have you done? Where's your financial projections? The interrogation continued for another hour. By the time I left, I was fighting back tears, my confidence severely shaken. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being foolish and impulsive. But 3 days later, when the loan was approved, I signed the paperwork anyway. I gave 2 weeks' notice at my marketing firm, where my boss looked at me with the same mixture of confusion and pity that my family had. You're making a huge mistake, my mother said when I called to tell her everything was finalized. Don't come crying to us when you fail." Those words echoed in my ears as I packed up my apartment, canceling my lease 6 months early and paying the penalty. As I loaded my life into a rented moving truck, doubt crept in. What if everyone was right? What if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life? The reality of what I'd done hit me hard on my first morning waking up in the guest cottage. I stood on the porch at dawn looking out at my property, my responsibility now. The morning light revealed all the flaws I'd glossed over during weekend visits. The bee yard was overgrown with weeds. Several hive stands leaned precariously. The honey house roof had water damage. The extraction equipment was outdated. The farm truck had rust spots and made a concerning noise when started. "What have I done?" I whispered to myself, panic rising in my throat. Grandpa found me there an hour later, still in my pajamas, staring blankly at the property. Having second thoughts, he asked gently. "No," I lied. "Just planning where to start." We began with a hive inspection. The news wasn't good. Of the 20 remaining hives, 6 were severely weakened by varroa mites, a parasitic pest that had become the bane of beekeepers nationwide. 2 more had signs of deformed wing virus. The strongest hives were producing at about 60% of their potential. "We'll need to treat for mites right away," Grandpa said, "and requeen some of these weaker hives." I nodded, jotting notes on my phone, adding item after item to my to-do list. By lunch, that list had grown overwhelming. By dinner, it seemed impossible. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, creating a detailed budget spreadsheet. The numbers were grim. At current production levels, the farm was barely breaking even. The loan payments would put us firmly in the red, unless I could increase honey yield and find better markets. The next day, I attended my first meeting of the Central Illinois Beekeepers Association. I walked into the community center conference room with high hopes of finding mentorship and community. "Harold's granddaughter, huh?" said Bill Thompson, the association president, a man in his 60s with leathery skin from decades in the Sunday herd you took over. Bold move for a city girl. Several of the older beekeepers exchanged glances. I was clearly an outsider, too young, too female, too inexperienced in their eyes. Only one member approached me after the meeting, Jackson Reynolds, a beekeeper in his early 30s who ran a moderately successful operation 1 county over. "Don't mind them," he said. "They're suspicious of anyone under 50. What made you decide to take over your grandfather's place?" "Long story," I replied, not wanting to get into my family drama with a stranger. "Well, commercial beekeeping isn't for the faint of heart these days," he said, handing me his card. "Call if you need anything, but don't expect miracles." Not exactly a warm welcome, but at least it was something. The first major disaster struck 3 weeks in. A severe thunderstorm ripped through the area, sending a tree branch through the roof of the equipment shed. Rain poured in, damaging the electrical system and shorting out the small honey pump we used during extraction. The repair bill came to $1,800, money I didn't have to spare. I put it on a credit card, trying not to think about the interest rate. The physical demands of the job shocked my desk job-conditioned body. By the end of each day, my back ached, my arms were sore, and despite wearing protective gear, I collected my share of stings. I developed calluses where I'd once had a perfect manicure. Twice I dropped honey-laden supers, the boxes containing honey frames, because I underestimated their weight. One landed on my foot, resulting in a bruise that lingered for weeks. The learning curve was steeper than I'd anticipated. Despite my childhood experiences, running a commercial operation required specialized knowledge. I made expensive mistakes, like the time I mixed the wrong concentration of mite treatment, necessitating a second application and wasting precious product. About 6 weeks in, my parents called. I hadn't spoken to them since moving day. "How's the farming life?" Dad asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's beekeeping, not farming." "And it's going fine," I lied, looking at my disaster of a kitchen table covered in beekeeping books, invoices, and treatment schedules. "Your old boss called," Mom chimed in. "Wendy's going on maternity leave." They need someone to cover her accounts. Said they'd take you back, no questions asked. The temptation washed over me like a wave. I could end this struggle, return to air conditioning, predictable hours, and a steady paycheck. I'm not interested, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. Madison Dad sighed. It's not too late to admit this was a mistake. No one would blame you. After hanging up, I walked out to the bee yard at sunset. The hives were quieting down for the night, just a few foragers returning with the last pollen loads of the day. I sat on an overturned bucket and finally let myself cry. I'd spent nearly all my savings. I was in debt. I was exhausted. And I had very little to show for my efforts so far. I can't fail, I whispered to the bees. I can't give them the satisfaction. But that night, lying in bed, I wondered if determination alone would be enough. The next morning I woke up with swollen eyes but a clearer mind. If I was going to make this work, I needed to think strategically. Marketing was my background. I needed to apply those skills to this business. I spent the next week researching successful honey businesses across the country. I joined online beekeeping forums, subscribed to industry publications, and ordered books on apiculture business models. I discovered something interesting. The most profitable bee operations weren't the largest ones, but the ones that had successfully differentiated themselves in the market. Bulk honey prices were at record lows due to cheap imported honey, some of which was adulterated with corn syrup. But specialty honey markets were thriving. Consumers were increasingly interested in local raw organic products with transparent sourcing. I developed a three-pronged strategy. 1. Transition to organic divided by sustainable beekeeping practices. 2. Develop value-added products beyond just honey. 3. Create a compelling brand story and direct-to-consumer sales channels. I enrolled in online courses about organic beekeeping certification. I learned about treatment-free approaches, though I realized a complete transition would take years. Still, even moving in that direction would give me marketing leverage. Next, I researched value-added products. The profit margins on specialty items like infused honeys, honeycomb, bee pollen, beeswax candles, and honey-based skincare products were 3 to 5 times higher than raw honey alone. Finally, I worked on branding. I spent late nights designing a logo, website, and packaging concepts that told the story of a third-generation bee farm being revitalized by the founder's granddaughter. I emphasized heritage, sustainability, and artisanal quality, the intersection of tradition and innovation. Armed with this research and a detailed business plan, I made an appointment with an agricultural loan officer at Central Illinois Credit Union. Mr. Davison, the loan officer, looked skeptical from the moment I walked in. Miss Williams, I see you're requesting a $30,000 business expansion loan. You've owned this operation for less than 2 months. Yes, but I've been involved with it my entire life. Your grandfather's operation has been declining for years according to these tax records. Which is exactly why new investment and a fresh approach are needed, I countered, sliding my business plan across his desk. I've identified specific market opportunities that weren't being leveraged. He skimmed the document, his expression unchanging. These projections seem optimistic. They're based on market research and comparable operations in similar regions. I've included all my sources in the appendix. By the end of the hour, I hadn't secured the full amount, but he approved a $15,000 line of credit, enough to begin implementing parts of my plan if I was careful with every dollar. The next phase involved connecting with the local community. I reached out to the organizers of the Springfield Farmers Market, securing a spot for the upcoming season. The booth fee was steep, $500 for the 16-week season, but it would be my primary customer acquisition channel. When I mentioned my plans to Jackson after the next Beekeepers Association meeting, he raised an eyebrow. Flavored honeys and fancy packaging sounds expensive. Higher margins justify the investment, I replied a bit defensively. And I'm not just selling honey, I'm selling an experience, a connection to the source. He looked skeptical but offered to stop by the farm that weekend to look at my hive setup. Your grandfather runs single deeps, right? You might want to consider transitioning to a double deep brood system. Gives the queens more laying space, stronger colonies. It was the first genuinely helpful advice I'd received from a fellow beekeeper, and I felt a small surge of optimism. That feeling was short-lived. The following Saturday, my parents made their first visit to the farm since I'd taken over. Mom wrinkled her nose at the guest cottage, which I'd tried to make presentable but was admittedly rustic. "You gave up your beautiful apartment for this?" she asked, eyeing the second-hand furniture. Dad focused on the bee yard, which was still in transition. "Doesn't look like much has changed. Still seems run down to me." I tried to explain my vision and progress, showing them my product prototypes and branding concepts. Dad cut me off mid-sentence. "Madison, this all sounds like a fancy marketing plan for a business that lacks fundamentals. The agricultural sector isn't like selling sneakers or smartphones. You can't just rebrand struggling bees." "That's not what I'm doing." "Honey, we're worried about you," Mom interjected. "You've lost weight. You look tired. This place is primitive. Is it really worth sacrificing your quality of life?" "I'm building something," I insisted. "It takes time." "Time is money," Dad replied. "And you're burning through yours. Be realistic. At what point will you admit this experiment has failed?" The conversation escalated into an argument when I refused to give them a failure timeline. They left angry, and I was left feeling even more determined to prove them wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I reviewed my business plan, tweaking projections and timelines. I knew the key would be making it to next spring with enough capital to increase my hive count. More hives meant more honey, which meant more revenue. But I needed to survive the winter first, both financially and emotionally. Number. Part 6. Innovation and First Signs of Success. By mid-August, I had implemented several changes to the bee operation. Following Jackson's advice, I transitioned 10 hives to a double-deep brood system. I developed a rigorous, integrated pest management approach that reduced chemical treatments while maintaining hive health. I planted additional bee-friendly flowers and arranged with neighboring farmers to place hives near their buckwheat and clover fields. But my most exciting work happened in the honey house kitchen. I experimented with dozens of flavor infusions, carefully noting which combinations worked and which failed. Lavender honey was delicate and floral. Cinnamon honey had warm, comforting notes. Habanero honey created a fascinating sweet heat contrast. I designed distinctive labels for each variety featuring watercolor illustrations of the farm and the story behind each flavor. I created a cohesive visual identity that would stand out on market shelves. For the online store, I wrote compelling product descriptions and origin stories. I photographed the honey jars in beautiful settings around the farm, morning light filtering through amber honeybees working wildflower blossoms, Grandpa Harold inspecting a frame with me beside him. The Springfield Farmers Market debut came in early September. I arrived nervously at 6 a.m. to set up my booth, arranging the honey jars in an attractive display. I'd invested in a professional banner, tablecloths, and tasting spoons, expenses that made me wince but that I knew were necessary for the image I wanted to project. The first hour was slow, with just a few curious lookers but no sales. Then a woman stopped, tried my lavender honey sample, and her eyes widened. "This is incredible," she said. "So different from grocery store honey." She bought 2 jars and called her friend over. By noon, I'd sold 32 jars at $12 each, nearly $400 in revenue. By closing time, I'd cleared $650 and collected 87 email addresses for my newsletter. I drove home elated. It wasn't enough to save the business on its own, but it was validation that my approach could work. People responded to quality story and experience exactly as I'd hoped. The following week, I convinced a local upscale grocery store Harvest Market to carry 3 varieties of my honey. The buyer was initially hesitant but changed her mind after tasting the samples. "We've got customers asking for more local products," she admitted. "Let's start with a small order and see how it goes." My online store launched in late September with modest success, mostly friends and former colleagues at first, but word began to spread. Each package included a handwritten thank you note and an invitation to follow the farm's journey on social media. Speaking of social media, I created accounts for Wildflower Ridge Honey Farm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I posted daily updates, the morning inspection routine, close-ups of bees gathering pollen, time-lapses of honey being extracted and bottled. I was transparent about the challenges and victories, positioning myself as both a dedicated beekeeper and a relatable young woman taking a risk on her dreams. A local newspaper reporter spotted my booth at the farmers market and became intrigued by my story. The resulting article, "City Marketer Trades Corporate Life for Beekeeping," generated significant local interest. My website traffic tripled the week it was published. Jackson started stopping by more frequently, initially to offer advice but increasingly just to talk. We discovered shared interests beyond beekeeping, hiking, classic movies, and a mutual love for bad science fiction novels. A friendship began to blossom with hints of something more. As autumn approached, I faced my next challenge, developing products for the seasons when honey harvests were minimal. I collaborated with Emma, a local herbalist, to create a line of honey-based skincare products, lip balms, face masks, and body scrubs using beeswax and honey from my hives. I also connected with Riverfront Brewery about a potential honey wheat ale collaboration for the spring. The head brewer was enthusiastic about using local honey in a seasonal offering. Just as things seemed to be gaining momentum, disaster struck. My ancient honey extractor, a crucial piece of equipment that spins the honey out of the combs, suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure during the fall harvest. I needed $3,200 for a replacement, money I simply didn't have. My line of credit was nearly maxed out and I still needed operating capital for the winter. With no choice, I put the extractor on my personal credit card, pushing my debt even higher. That evening, my parents called. They'd seen my social media posts and wanted an update. "It looks like you're playing farmer on Instagram," Mom said. "Very cute photos." "I'm not playing at anything," I replied, too exhausted to mask my irritation. "I'm building a business." "Your father and I have been talking," she continued, ignoring my tone. "We think you should consider selling half the property to the developers. You keep the house and enough land for a few hobby hives and use the money to pay off your debts." The suggestion felt like a slap. "I'm not selling an inch of this land." "You're being stubborn and impractical," Dad chimed in. "This isn't about pride, Madison. It's about financial reality." After hanging up, I sat on the porch steps, fighting back tears of frustration. Was I being impractical? Was this all just an expensive exercise in pride? The next morning, I woke to an unexpected email. A specialty food retailer based in Chicago had found my products through the newspaper article and wanted to place a wholesale order for their holiday gift baskets, 150 jars of assorted flavored honeys with expedited delivery. It was the largest single order I'd received, worth over $1, 0 inches wholesale revenue. It would strain my production capacity but provide much-needed capital. As I filled those jars one by one, carefully applying each label by hand, I felt a small but significant shift. For the first time, I wasn't just struggling to survive, I was actually building something with potential. By February, 6 months into my beekeeping adventure, Wildflower Ridge Honey Farm was showing real signs of life. My products were in 3 local stores, my online sales were steady if modest, and I had a small but growing base of loyal customers who ordered regularly. I'd hired Zoe, a local college student studying agricultural business, to work part-time helping with production, packaging, and farmers market sales. She brought welcome energy and fresh ideas to the operation. With spring approaching, I invested in increasing my hive count. I purchased 20 nucleus colonies, small starter hives from a reputable breeder, nearly doubling my capacity. I also ordered equipment to build additional hives as they expanded. My product line had grown as well. Beyond my original 6 flavored honeys, I now offered honeycomb sections, bee pollen for health enthusiasts, propolis tincture, beeswax candles, honey-based skincare line developed with Emma, gift sets, and subscription boxes. The honey-based skincare line was particularly successful with profit margins around 70% compared to 30% for plain honey. Emma and I spent evenings experimenting with new formulations in her small workshop, combining honey with essential oils, herbs, and natural clays. But scaling brought new challenges. Production bottlenecks emerged. What worked when making 10 jars of lavender honey at once didn't translate efficiently to making 100. My kitchen became inadequate for the volume I needed to produce. Quality control became more difficult. Twice I had to recall small batches, once when I discovered a flavored honey wasn't properly mixed, creating inconsistent taste, and once when new labels weren't adhering properly to jars. The supply chain proved frustratingly unreliable. Glass jar shortages delayed orders. The specialty beeswax I used for premium candles doubled in price with little warning. A shipment of incorrect caps meant reordering and expedited shipping to meet deadlines. Most challenging was managing my own energy. I was working 80 to 90-hour weeks, caring for the bees, producing products, filling orders, managing social media, updating the website, handling accounting, and working farmers markets on weekends. I survived on coffee and determination, often forgetting to eat regular meals. The breaking point came in April during the height of spring buildup, the time when bee colonies grow most rapidly and require intensive management. I'd been up since dawn inspecting hives. By afternoon, I was bottling honey for a large order. As I worked into the evening on website updates, my vision suddenly blurred. The room spun. I barely made it to the couch before collapsing. I woke to Jackson pounding on my door. We'd had plans to review a business proposal and I'd missed our meeting. He found me pale, disoriented, and feverish. "Hospital now," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The diagnosis was exhaustion, dehydration, and a respiratory infection I'd been ignoring for weeks. The doctor ordered 2 days of bed rest and fluids. "You're not superhuman," Jackson scolded as he drove me home. "You need help." "I can't afford more staff," I admitted. "Then you need systems and priorities and occasionally sleep." He stayed at the farm for the next 3 days, managing essential hive checks while I recovered. He rearranged the honey house for better workflow, installed shelving to maximize space, and set up a proper inventory system to replace my haphazard approach. Watching him work efficiently where I had been struggling was both humbling and eye-opening. He wasn't working harder than I was, he was working smarter with years of experience guiding his decisions. As I regained my strength, something shifted between us. The professional friendship bloomed into something more personal. Our conversations extended beyond beekeeping to hopes, fears, and dreams. I found myself looking forward to his visits for reasons beyond his expertise. My parents called when they heard about my collapse from Grandpa. "This is exactly what we warned you about," Mom said, her voice tight with an "I told you so" attitude barely concealed by concern. "You're working yourself to death for what, some jars of honey?" "It's more than that," I insisted. "The business is growing. I just need better systems." "The business is consuming you," Dad countered. "Sell while you still have your health." There's no shame in admitting this was too much. Their words stung, especially because a small part of me wondered if they might be right. I was making progress, but at what cost? Was I being stubborn at the expense of my well-being? That evening, Jackson brought dinner and business advice. As we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the bee yard, he asked the question no one else had bothered to ask. "Are you happy, Madison?" "Not successful, happy." I considered the question carefully. When I'm working with the bees, absolutely. When I see someone taste my honey and their eyes light up, definitely. When I'm drowning in paperwork and supply chain issues, Not so much. He nodded. Then we need to maximize the parts that bring you joy, and find solutions for the rest. The we wasn't lost on me. Somehow my journey had become a shared one. Together we developed systems to streamline operations. Jackson introduced me to software that simplified inventory management and order fulfillment. We reorganized the production space for efficiency. I delegated more responsibility to Zoe and hired a second part-timer for farmers markets. As May arrived, something unexpected happened. A travel blogger with a substantial Instagram following visited the farmers market, tried my habanero honey, and posted about it. The post went semi-viral in foodie circles, bringing a surge of online orders and social media followers. A regional food magazine contacted me for a feature story. The writer spent a day at the farm documenting the operation and my journey from marketing executive to beekeeper. The resulting 5-page spread titled "The Sweet Success of Failure" portrayed my story as one of courage and reinvention. Orders flooded in after publication. For the first time I had more demand than supply. It was a good problem to have, but still a problem. I needed to expand again and quickly. As I calculated the investment required, I realized I'd reached another crossroads. I'd need significant capital to scale to the next level. The farm had proven its concept, but bridging the gap between proven concept and sustainable business would require resources I didn't have. May 15th marked 1 year since I signed the papers to purchase Grandpa's bee farm. I celebrated by taking my first full day off in months, spending it with Jackson hiking at Starved Rock State Park. Away from the farm and daily pressures, I gained perspective on how far I'd come. 1 year ago today, everyone thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life, I told Jackson as we looked out over the Illinois River Valley. Sometimes I thought they might be right. And now, he asked. Now I know they were wrong. This was exactly what I needed to do. The following week, I sat down to assess the farm's financial position. The numbers surprised me. While not wildly profitable, the operation had reached break-even status 3 months earlier than my business plan projected. The diversified revenue streams, direct sales, wholesale value-added products, and educational workshops I'd recently begun offering created stability that selling bulk honey alone never could have achieved. Social media had become a significant driver of business. My authentic storytelling about the challenges and triumphs of beekeeping resonated with people. A video of me explaining how to spot the queen bee went unexpectedly viral, garnering over 2 million views and bringing thousands of new followers to my accounts. Local interest in the farm had grown as well. Weekend tours were consistently booked solid. The beekeeping workshops I offered monthly sold out within hours of being announced. I'd begun collaborating with a nearby farm-to-table restaurant that featured my honey in seasonal dishes and cocktails, with the chef creating a special menu for honey harvest dinner events. The honey wine mead collaboration with Riverfront Brewery had exceeded all expectations. Wildflower Ridge Reserve, a small batch mead using my wildflower honey, sold out its initial production run in 2 weeks. The brewery wanted to make it a permanent offering, requiring a substantial ongoing honey supply. With all these opportunities, I faced a critical decision: how to grow sustainably. I needed more hives, more production space, and more hands. The cottage kitchen was woefully inadequate for current production levels, let alone future growth. I needed a proper commercial kitchen and honey processing facility. Jackson and I worked on expansion plans late into several nights. The minimum viable expansion would require about $120,000 for a small production building, additional hive equipment, a delivery van, inventory, and working capital to bridge the gap until the new capacity generated revenue. The bank was willing to consider a loan, but wanted to see additional investors or collateral. I'd sunk every penny I had into the business already, Grandpa offered his modest savings, but I refused to risk his retirement security. What about bringing on a partner? Jackson suggested one evening. Are you offering? I asked, half joking. He looked at me with unexpected seriousness. Actually, yes. I've been thinking about it for a while. My operation is stable but has limited growth potential on my current land. Together we'd have economies of scale, complementary skills, and… He hesitated. Well, I'd get to spend more time with you. The proposition made both business and personal sense. Jackson had 10 years of commercial beekeeping experience, owned equipment we could share, and had established supply chain relationships. Plus, there was the undeniable chemistry between us that had been building for months. We agreed to spend a week, thinking it through separately, before making any decisions. This was too important to rush with both our livelihoods and our budding relationship at stake. The universe, however, had other plans. 3 days later, I received a call from my mother. Your father and I are coming to visit this weekend, she announced without preamble. We need to talk about something important. Mom, this weekend is really busy. We have tours scheduled and we'll be there Saturday at 10. It won't take long. Her tone left no room for negotiation. I spent the next few days anxious about what this important talk might entail. Were they going to pressure me again to stage some kind of intervention? Saturday morning arrived, sunny and warm. I was checking hives when my parents' Mercedes pulled up the gravel driveway. They looked out of place in their country club casual attire. Dad in pressed khakis and a polo shirt, Mom in white capris and a floral blouse. The place looks different, Dad said, surveying the property. He wasn't wrong. The farm had transformed over the past year. The bee yard was neat and organized, with 50 thriving hives arranged in tidy rows. The honey house exterior had been repaired and painted a cheerful yellow. Flower beds bloomed around the cottage and along the driveway. A new sign marked the entrance: Wildflower Ridge Honey Farm, Est. 1962. Reinvented 2024. We have a tour group coming at 11, I explained, leading them to the porch where I'd set out coffee. So we'll need to make this quick. Mom looked uncomfortable. Madison, we owe you an apology. Of all the things I expected her to say, that wasn't even on the list. I stared at her in confusion. We saw the magazine article, Dad continued. And we've been following your social media. What you've accomplished here is impressive. You actually did it, Mom added. You took a failing business and turned it around. We didn't think it was possible. Thank you, I said, carefully waiting for the other shoe to drop. We've been talking, Dad said, exchanging a glance with Mom. We're interested in investing in your expansion. I nearly choked on my coffee. You're what? We saw your business plan on the kitchen table last time we visited, Mom admitted. The expansion plans looked solid, very professional. You read my private business documents? I asked, incredulous. The point is, Dad continued, ignoring my question, we believe in what you're doing now. We'd like to invest $150 0 inches exchange for a 20% silent partnership. I set down my coffee cup, speechless. After a year of ridicule, doubt, and I told you so's, my parents wanted to invest. The same parents who had laughed in my face when I announced my plans. Just then a van pulled into the driveway, followed by several cars. My 11 o'clock tour group was arriving early. Among them was Jackson, who had volunteered to help with the beekeeping demonstration portion. I need to handle this tour, I told my parents. We'll continue this conversation later. Of course, Dad said. Mind if we tag along? We've never actually seen what you do here. The tour proceeded better than I could have scripted it. The visitors were enthusiastic, asking thoughtful questions. My parents observed silently at first, then began asking questions of their own. I explained the life cycle of honeybees, demonstrated how we extract honey, and outlined our sustainable practices. Jackson handled the hive inspection masterfully, his calm confidence with the bees impressing everyone, including my father, who whispered to my mother, "The man knows what he's doing." At the honey tasting portion, Mom's eyes widened as she sampled the lavender honey. "This is exquisite, Madison. Nothing like grocery store honey." The tour concluded at the farm store I'd set up in the converted garage, where visitors purchased honey beeswax candles and skincare products. As the last customer checked out, having spent nearly $200, Dad raised an eyebrow. "Your margins on these specialty products must be excellent," he noted, the businessman in him calculating figures. "They are," I confirmed, "especially the skincare line." As the visitors departed, a sense of pride washed over me. My parents had witnessed firsthand what I'd built from the useless bee farm they'd urged me to abandon. Over lunch, we discussed their investment offer. The terms were fair, the money would enable the exact expansion I needed, and they were adamant about being silent partners. "We won't interfere with operations," Dad assured me. "This is your vision. We're just providing capital to help it grow faster." I was tempted to accept immediately but held back. "I need time to think about it. I'm considering other partnership options as well." "Other investors?" Mom asked. "Possibly." I glanced toward Jackson, who was cleaning equipment nearby. Dad followed my gaze, understanding dawning. "Ah, a different kind of partnership. I need a few days to sort through my options," I said firmly. They agreed, and as they prepared to leave, Mom embraced me, a genuine hug, not the perfunctory kind I usually received. "We're proud of you, Madison," she said softly. "You proved us wrong. That takes real courage and vision." Their Mercedes disappeared down the driveway, leaving me stunned by the day's events. "Well, that was unexpected," Jackson said, joining me on the porch. "Completely," I agreed. "After a year of thinking I was failing, suddenly they want to invest. What are you going to do?" I took his hand, a decision crystallizing. "I think I'm going to propose a three-way partnership. Their capital, your expertise, my vision, with equal decision-making between you and me on operations, and my parents as silent financial partners." He squeezed my hand. "I like the sound of that, both the business part and..." He paused, "the you and me part." As the sun set over Wildflower Ridge Honey Farm that evening, I realized how far I'd come from the corporate marketer who'd impulsively bought a failing bee farm. The journey had been harder than I'd imagined, but also infinitely more rewarding. The partnership negotiations took place over a series of dinners, spreadsheets, and legal consultations. We finally settled on terms that worked for everyone. My parents would provide $150,000 for a 15% stake as silent partners. Jackson would merge his operation with mine and become an equal operating partner. And I would maintain majority ownership and decision-making authority. Our first family dinner after finalizing the agreement was markedly different from the one a year earlier, where they'd laughed at my decision. We gathered at the farmhouse with Grandpa Harold beaming with pride at the head of the table. "I always knew you had it in you, Maddie," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To the future of Wildflower Ridge." As we enjoyed a meal featuring honey in every course, from honey-glazed carrots to baklava for dessert, my father cleared his throat. "I need to tell you something, Madison," he said, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. "When you bought this place, it hit a nerve for me." "What do you mean?" I asked. He set down his fork. "When I was about your age, I wanted to open my own financial advisory firm. I had a business plan, potential clients lined up, everything. But my father talked me out of it. Too risky, he said. I took the safe corporate route instead." This was news to me. Dad had always seemed the epitome of corporate ambition. "I projected my own regrets onto you," he continued. "When you bought the farm, part of me was jealous of your courage to do what I never did." Mom reached for his hand. "We both worried you'd fail and be hurt. But we should have supported your dream, not undermined it." "I understand," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "Fear of failure is powerful." "The irony," Dad said with a rueful smile, "is that investing in your bee farm might be the most entrepreneurial thing I've ever done. Better late than never, I suppose." That conversation marked a genuine healing in our relationship. For the first time in my adult life, I felt my parents really saw me as a capable, independent person whose choices deserved respect. With the investment secured, we moved quickly on expansion plans. We broke ground on a new honey house with a commercial kitchen, extraction room, and small event space for workshops and tastings. Jackson moved his 25 hives to Wildflower Ridge, bringing our total to 75 strong colonies with plans to expand to 100 by the following spring. We hired 2 additional employees. Zoe moved to full-time production manager, and we added Miguel for hive maintenance and Riley for sales and marketing. This freed me to focus on product development and business strategy areas where I could best leverage my marketing background. Jackson and I developed complementary roles. He oversaw hive management and honey production, while I handled product development, marketing, and sales. Together, we created an education program that included beginner beekeeping workshops, honey tasting events, and school field trips. The product line expanded to include seasonal limited editions, corporate gift packages, and a Honey of the Month subscription service. Our collaboration with Riverfront Brewery expanded to include a honey porter and seasonal mead varieties. As summer transitioned to fall, Jackson and I found our personal relationship deepening alongside our business partnership. Late nights discussing hive management turned into conversations about life goals, family dreams, and shared values. The guest cottage felt increasingly like our home rather than just my residence. On a perfect autumn evening, as we inspected the last hives of the day, Jackson suddenly dropped to one knee beside a blooming patch of asters. "Madison Williams," he said, holding up a small wooden box with a ring inside. "I've fallen in love with you and your bees. Will you marry me?" The ring was unique rose gold, with tiny bees engraved around a center honeycomb pattern holding a golden-hued diamond. "Yes," I said without hesitation, pulling him up for a kiss as bees buzzed curiously around us. The groundbreaking ceremony for our new honey house happened the following week. The whole family gathered as Grandpa Harold turned the first shovelful of soil, his hands steadier than they'd been in years. When I thought about selling this place, he told the small crowd of family, friends, and community supporters, I never imagined it would become this. Madison didn't just save the farm, she reinvented it for the next generation. My parents stood nearby looking genuinely happy. Mom had traded her designer outfits for jeans and practical shoes when visiting the farm. Dad had started reading beekeeping books and asking increasingly technical questions about hive management. "We're thinking of building a small cabin on the north corner of the property," Mom mentioned casually after the ceremony, "for weekend visits, if that would be all right with you." The request stunned me. My parents, who once couldn't wait to leave the farm after brief visits, now wanted a permanent place here. Of course I agreed. There's plenty of room. As we celebrated that evening with a honey wine toast under strings of lights in the bee yard, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had arrived broken and uncertain, clutching a dream everyone told me was foolish. I was leaving this first year with a thriving business, a fiancé who shared my passion, reconciled family relationships, and a clear vision for the future. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of crushing doubt, physical exhaustion, and financial terror. But through perseverance, strategic thinking, and the courage to ask for help when needed, I'd transformed not just the farm but myself. Sometimes the dreams others mock become your greatest achievements. Sometimes the failures others predict become your most profound successes. And sometimes when you follow your heart despite the ridicule, those same skeptics end up asking to join your journey. As you followed my story from corporate marketer to successful beekeeper, I'm curious, what dream are you hesitating to pursue because others think it's foolish? Share in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey, from ridicule to success, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need encouragement to follow their own unconventional dream. Thank you for being part of the Wildflower Ridge family. And remember, the sweetest success often comes from the most unexpected places.